The inside story on the issues that affect you and your community. This is Local 12 Newsmakers.
Good morning and welcome to Local 12 Newsmakers. I'm Dan Hurley. Most of the Ohio primary ballot is filled with races between candidates in either the Republican, Democratic, Libertarian, or Green parties, vying for state legislature, U.S. Congress, or a host of central committee positions in their own parties. But there are also several school and other levies on the ballot. I always try to focus on one or two that are important not only to the people in a particular area, but because they reveal the larger dynamics of the political environment at a particular moment. This year, Springfield Township in central Hamilton County is asking residents to approve a levy to support fire and EMS services. What will appear as issue 5 on the Hamilton County ballot in the township only proposes an additional $1 mil levy for 5 years. That would mean for every $100,000 of valuation, a homeowner will pay about $30.40 per year, or $2.51 per month. To discuss the Springfield Township fire levy, I am joined now by Michael Hinnenkamp, who has served as the Township Administrator since 1995, and Joe Honerlaw, who has been a member of the Springfield Township Board of Trustees since 1996 and currently serves as the President of the Board. Mr. Honerlaw is an attorney with offices in Springfield Township. Welcome to Newsmakers. Joe, let's start with you.
Dan.
Asking for taxes, and these are new taxes, is never a comfortable thing, especially in our general environment in both the economy and politics. Why is this one necessary from the trustees' point of view?
Well, Dan, this was a situation where we've had a fire levy on the books for a number of years, and when we go out and when we go to the voters and ask them to approve a levy, and in township government we can't enact levies ourselves. It has to be with the voters' approval. We generate usually a pretty set amount of money. The levy will bring in that amount of money. Over the years, as there are increases in the cost of doing business, of running a fire department, increases in fuel, insurance, supplies, wages, all the things that we have, the levy starts to run out, and we carefully look at our budgets every year and determine where we think how far we can stretch those levies every year. But once we get to the place where we know we're going to start to run a deficit, and we as a township local government can't do that, we have to go back to the voters and ask for an increase in the amount of funding that we have.
Now, I know a little bit about what Springfield Township's been going through in the past few months, and also lots of other local governments. But Mike, I know there was a possibility of having to lay people off in the fire department. What have the firefighters themselves done in terms of negotiations before you had to put this levy on the ballot?
Mm-hmm. Well, Dan, it's been a process that we've really been working on since July and having conversations with our firefighters, and they have come to the table and worked very willingly with us and the Board of Trustees to try to find solutions. And one of the things that the firefighters have done is renegotiated their collective bargaining agreement. It had one more year remaining. In other words, 12 would have been the final year of that contract. In 2012, it did call for the firefighters to receive a 2.7% pay increase. They gave that pay increase up, and then went even further and said, we'll do a whole new 3-year contract with no freezing salaries for that period of time. We looked at some changes to the way overtime was paid, and also made some changes to insurance and benefits and things of that nature. Collectively, those will result in about $125,000 worth of savings per year, and we were able to get that done. And I think that was a critical, absolutely critical piece to a bigger puzzle for how we solve this budget crisis that we were in.
And let's talk about the bigger picture here a little bit, not just the very specific. And I think it's important, I'll say it, when state government adopted its budget last year, a lot of that impacted and was done at on the backs of local government units, whether it's cities or townships or whatever. How does the new state budget affect, Mike, your funding?
Oh, it affects us dramatically. You know, when you look big picture, townships are sort of anomalies in the sense that we're funded, we're sort of a la carte government. We have monies, funding that comes for specific purposes. We're not like a city where all of our money's in the general fund and then we divvy it up. We have a general fund, but it's not the largest fund. But the biggest issues with the state is, of course, they've made a 50% reduction over the next 2 years in the local government fund. So this was monies that went into our general fund. They have eliminated a tangible personal property tax reimbursement that local governments had been receiving. And then, of course, the big granddaddy of them all for our perspective is the elimination of the estate tax. All told, that's a reduction of about $2.2 million annually to Springfield Township. Now, that breaks out over all of these different funds.
Right, but out of what total
well,
budget?
roughly out of about a $20 million budget.
So significant.
Significant.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, very significant. You know, almost 40% of our general fund is gone. Now, that's not necessarily the fire issue, but it is a piece of the puzzle. As Joe said, we look, you know, we're always looking 5-7 years out in our projections, and so we knew that we were coming to the end of the useful life of the fire levy within the next year or two, and had to, you know, the board was starting to talk about how we were going to deal with that issue. What happened with the state budget is simply accelerated and put us into an absolute crisis mode where we weren't even going to be able to get through 2012 without making a variety of these different changes.
Joe, this levy is on top of the existing levy. This is new money, right?
That is correct.
Okay. This time it's a 5-year levy. It's not a permanent levy. Why that calculation?
Well, I'll tell you, for Springfield Township, we have some of the highest property taxes in the area. And that's primarily because of the fact that we're a bedroom community. Our residents, they want good services, and we provide, I think, a very high level of service to our residents. But when you add the township is roughly 24, maybe 25% of the tax of the property taxes, and you add on all the county levies and the school levies, and we have very high property taxes in Springfield Township, and for that reason, we're as a board, as one of the trustees, we were very reluctant to add to that if we could possibly avoid it. The board, you know, speaking for myself and my fellow trustees, we agreed to this levy, but we wanted to do the least amount necessary, and it worked because it was the missing piece of the puzzle. We got concessions from our firefighters. We made some reductions in staffing. We've done a bunch of different things, but this was the last thing we needed, this extra $1 million of revenue to move the department forward.
You're the elected official.
Correct.
We've just gone through some complicated stuff which can make the average person's head spin, including mine, with all these numbers and state budgets and all this stuff. You're the elected official. What are people, your constituents, your residents, saying to you about this levy? Do they understand the backdrop that you're facing as a trustee?
Well, I think there is a part of our citizenry that I think is starting to understand it. I think there are a lot of people that are really not well versed in what all the impacts of the state budget, what those impacts will be on local governments. I think that actually some of the elected officials, as well as the citizens, are just now kind of starting to realize what the long-term effects are going to be. And the kind of the bad thing about the local budget or the state budget is it's coming at the worst possible. These cuts that we're receiving from the state, one way to look at it is it's a cut from the state. Another way is to say it's our money that the state had that they're keeping and they're not giving back to us. But it's coming at it's turning kind of a perfect storm for local governments. With the recession, we've seen a decrease in property valuations,
right,
which has caused the amount of our levies, the amount that our levies generate per year, to go down.
Can I ask you a question on that? I know
Sure.
On some levies, I think it's on school levies, the actual statement is about the amount that is going to be collected. So if property values go up or down the actual millage is adjusted. Is this an absolute millage, or is this you're going to raise an absolute amount of money over 5 years?
Well, what you're talking about is a homestead and rollback part of it, and generally in it, and you're exactly right that generally if you run a levy, and you're going to receive generally the same amount of money whether you're having really good times or really bad times. That's true for residential property, and we are predominantly a bedroom community.
And I might say modest bedroom community. You don't have huge high end.
Well, we get a little bit of everything, actually. Very diverse community. But so that is very true. What was unique this year is we did see that in the projections for the new reappraised valuations, a dramatic drop in revenue on the existing millage that generally has been very, very steady, or you see a small increase. It's dropped fairly significantly because of the industrial and commercial property is not subject to that homestead and rollback, so it does fluctuate on a more, I think, even on an annual basis. So even though there's not a great percentage of that in terms of our land use, that's how big of a reduction that we're seeing, not just in Springfield Township, but across the region.
Let me raise this slightly. Both of you talk about you're always looking at the long range, looking out, not just the immediate year. You've both used that phrase one way or another. What about the question of looking at shared services to create more efficiencies? And we're talking about fire now. Fire EMS services. I mean, there's the cost of the first responders themselves. There's cost of administration. And then in this particular area, huge cost involved with equipment. Fire trucks are not inexpensive. Are there efficiencies to be looked for in Springfield Township cooperating, and I'll just throw out some possibilities. Mount Healthy, you've got to your west, you've got Wyoming to your east, you've got Green Hills to your north. Is there anything actively going on to try to look at shared services or even mergers of those fire departments?
You want me to?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you know, one of the things that we've done really over the years, but even more intensely in the last 6 months, is we've gone even a step further. We've looked internally, can police and fire be consolidated to realize some savings? And while that study's not completely finished, I think it was far enough along to say we need to keep studying this. There's some possibility, maybe not fully integrated.
Because collapsing the administrative cost?
Administrative cost and just being able to combine some of the roles.
Okay.
So, and then we do believe, without question, we can improve some of the service level, especially on response time, by combining a firefighter who's also a police officer and vice versa. Complicated, but something we're going to look at. We have spoken with Mount Healthy, we have spoken with Wyoming, and while nothing is firm right now, we're doing some small things together, and I do think eventually you're going to see that. The problem is that it's not as easy as it sounds, because you still need to cover these areas. And you know, with fire service, it's all about response time. Right. And so you need to be able to put a certain amount of personnel. Can you see some reduction in administrative costs? I don't think without question you can do that. And clearly on equipment is, I think, where the greatest opportunity lies.
And we're just about out of time, Joe, but it's also about placement of equipment, firehouses.
Absolutely.
Because response time is so important. If you've got two local units of government, sometimes in order to cover their area, that part of their area, and this, you've got to have those firehouses inefficiently placed.
And we have done that over the years with some of the areas of the township that are hard for us to service with our existing stations, the Pleasant Run Farms area, some of the other parts of the Hollydale area. We've contracted with other jurisdictions where they can get there a little quicker than we can to supply the services to our residents. So we're constantly looking at ways to collaborate with other jurisdictions through mutual aid and everything else. You know, we're doing it all the time.
Well, both the short term, and we'll see how this turns out on March the 6th, and the long term on this whole question of collaboration and maybe merger. We'll follow this because Mike knows this is a pet project of mine. And thank you very much for being here this morning, because I think we got not only at your levy, but at some of these larger issues which affect all of us locally.
Thank you,
Stay
Dan.
tuned.
Thank you, Dan.
Not since 1510, 500 years ago, has anyone created a handwritten illuminated Bible until recently. After the break, a local exhibit on the fascinating St. John's Bible Project.
It was over 15 years ago, 1995 to be exact, that Donald Jackson approached St. John's with his life's dream to create the first handwritten, illuminated Bible since the advent of the printing press more than 500 years ago.
In an age that glorifies technology, innovation, and rapid change, the new hand calligraphied and illuminated St. John's Bible is inspired by our age and intended to inspire our age. Welcome back. I first heard of the St. John's Bible Project about 8 years ago and was immediately intrigued. It is a visual manifestation of what every historian tries to do: spark a creative conversation between the present and the past by bringing together ancient text and medieval artistic traditions with 21st century knowledge and imagination. The St. John's Bible emerges fresh and moving. An exhibit at the College of Mount St. Joseph through February 26th allows you to glimpse inside this mammoth undertaking. To discuss the St. John's Bible and the exhibit, I am joined this morning by Shawnee Turner, an adjunct professor of art history at the College of Mount St. Joe. Ms. Turner was the recipient of the 2011 Adjunct Faculty Excellence Teaching Award. Welcome to Newsmakers.
Thank you for having me, Dan. Appreciate it.
If somebody has not yet seen this, we just use a little glimpse, and we'll take a look at some specifics as we go along here. How would you explain this from an art historian's point of view? How would you explain this project to somebody?
Well, besides being a phenomenal artistic and just time-consuming undertaking, what Donald Jackson and the whole entourage of people who were associated with this have done. And
it is a team. It
is a massive team of approximately 20 scribes and artists. They have not only communicated in some ways the tradition of bookmaking and when it comes to the Bible, but also updated it and made it for a 21st century audience. Really a book that anyone can come to and look at.
Yeah. Is there a favorite image that you have?
Oh, that's difficult. I think the one that struck me the most was Ezekiel's new plan for the temple as an art historian. Just because it's so colorful and it goes to a lot of religious traditions and things that I began to notice right away. Yeah. But I think outside of that would be creation. Creation is a really beautiful and very telling image for the whole Bible.
I'm glad you mentioned that because I've got that one.
Good.
I don't have Ezekiel.
It's okay.
Let's bring up the creation image here, the illumination creation image. And this is fascinating, and I know people can't see it real well. You can see it great at the exhibit. What's sort of the idea here? These are these bands. What's going on?
Well, this is the frontispiece to the book of Genesis. So these bands show us basically the creation, the 6 first days of creation and the day of rest. Mm-hmm. And it moves from chaos, which was actually inspired by fractals within chaos theory, all the way to rest and replenishment with those gold bands on the end. And what Donald Jackson does here is not only really give us the sense of Christ's or God's ability to take formless and void, which is the tohu wabahu, the text at the bottom on the chaos side, and move us from this formlessness and void to a kind of peaceful, restful element that we should in some ways feel with God.
One of the ones, just to move on, and very close to this, also Genesis, is the image of Adam and Eve. Mm-hmm. And what I think it's through, you can see this once you get used to what the illustrations are. This is threaded throughout all of the illustrations, including creation, but it just hits you when you see Adam and Eve. Yes. If we can bring that up. Because this is not our traditional, culturally defined image of Adam and Eve.
Right.
Talk about that a little bit.
Well, one of the things is that when Donald Jackson was putting this together, he was advised by what was known as the Committee on Illustration and Text. And this group of people really kind of tried to be inclusive and really take into historical elements and not just traditional kind of stereotypes and ideas. And the basis of this is that the original man would be kind of this Ethiopian identity, which is where the two images of the people come from. And even though we're looking at Adam and Eve, one of the interesting things about it is that we have this gold frame around those people, which is meant to represent how God is framing their lives and continues to frame our lives.
And in fact, gold is, whenever
Yes.
gold appears in
Yes.
the illustrations, it is a symbol of God breaking
Yes,
in.
it's a symbol of divinity. For instance, in the creation, in the first panel where he says, "Let there be light," there's just this single sliver of gold that comes down through that chaos.
And let's say what that gold is. It's not just gold ink,
Oh, it's gold leaf.
it's gold
Yes.
leaf. And so through this book, he's working gold leaf, and there's a wonderful video in the gallery,
Yes, there
and we'll
is.
talk about how people can access this, where he helps explain how the colors are created.
Yeah.
But the gold is gold leaf.
The gold is gold leaf, and it's platinum for the silver. The silver can be corrosive to the paper or to the vellum, so it's actually platinum. But everything is created naturally in terms of the pigments. It comes from vermilion, lapis lazuli, and I think one little interesting tidbit about the black, it comes from soot that was collected in China in the 19th century that
Yeah.
Jackson had actually purchased earlier in his life and had, as I heard a couple days ago, 144 and he used 142 on the Bible.
Wow. Looking ahead, yes. One of my favorite images is of Jesus sowing the seeds in the field. It's a New
Yes.
Testament image. And we can bring that up. And when you see this, it is actually 2 pages. And it's not real, you can't really see it on the screen real well, but the seeds literally are onto the page with the text.
Yes.
They're being sewn onto the page with the text, on the word. It's a fascinating approach, I think.
Well, I think one of the interesting things about that particular image is that it is so traditional, and the Bible really does a great job of combining contemporary elements with the traditional ones, and the sower is actually a very Byzantine representation in the way Christ is shown. However, he's shown as a contemporary farmer in his clothing. So
Right.
I think that's a nice, humorous edge to it that can kind of bring people in. And of course, the attachment with the illustration and the word is something that is completely intentional. It's meant to help you understand what the text is about and really enlighten you.
I want to go one more image here, and this is going back to the Old Testament, the image related to wisdom, the book of wisdom. And again, it makes the point, I think, it comes screaming through, that this isn't about some medieval image of the Bible.
Yes.
The faces of Sophia, of wisdom here, to a woman's face. Where does this face come from?
It's a Palestinian woman. It was taken from an image that Jackson had found. It was silk screened onto the original vellum when he was creating it. In some ways, this is a labor of love, because as you silk screen, you really have to hope and pray it just comes out okay, or that whole paper is going to be, or the whole page is going to be blown. But I think what this illustrates is one of the beliefs that the Bible was supposed to accomplish, in that it's accessible for many people of many faiths. And throughout the text of the St. John's Bible and the illustrations, you get multiple references, but not only for Christians, but Judaism, Islam, Buddhism as well. So it's not something that is for one particular group of people. And I think that wisdom woman image definitely shows that.
Yeah, this weekend I have spent my Friday at the Islamic Center, and there really is that chance of seeing the
Yes.
connection to all of the people of the book. It's
Yes.
very clear. I'm just about out of time, and I want to make sure people know how to find this exhibit,
Great.
but thank you. If you'd like to visit the exhibit at the Mound, it is housed in the San Giuseppe, is that the right way to pronounce it? Art
Yes.
Gallery. The exhibit is free and will be on campus through February 26. To learn more about the exhibit, go to the Mount's website, www.msj.edu, or call 513-244-4200. Thank you very much for being here, and thank you for hosting this exhibit.
Oh, a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for making Newsmakers a part of your Sunday morning. Join us again next week to meet the women and the men shaping our future, our community for the future. We end with a final reflection on the significance of the St. John's Bible.
And I think we can all agree that by all accounts, the St. John's Bible has lived up to its mission of inspiring the spiritual and artistic imagination of people around the world.